relations developed recently over the previous years, especially after President Sisi assumed office and established important stable relations. And a lot of issues were developed in the relations between Egypt and Sudan. And these visits try to reach agreements, especially political agreements. And the Egyptian-Sudanese relations have never been affected by any changes that happened. And the analysts and specialists in different fields mention that the integration between Egypt and Sudan would be enough to support the economies of both countries, because Egypt has a lot of strengths that it can share with Sudan, and also Sudan with its natural resources and wealth can help. Sudan is an important country in Africa and in the Middle East region. Sudan is an Arab African country, exactly like Egypt, and there are a lot of trade agreements between both countries. And everyone, of course, is looking for a brighter future for both countries if they can establish more joint projects and work towards more integration at the economic level. But first, Sudan needs to be united. A lot of blood was shed over the previous years, although Sudan has a lot of wealth and a lot of resources from which it can benefit. But it needs just to achieve stability to be able to do it. And Egypt has always had a fixed stance towards Sudan, and Egypt has always been keen on not intervening in the internal affairs of countries. And Sudan is to the south of Egypt, so it's considered to be the strategic depth for Egypt in the African continent. Egypt has always had a fixed political position to support the unity of countries and to develop cooperation with all the neighboring countries without intervening in the internal affairs of countries. Egypt only tries to play a role as a mediator between conflicting parties to reach an agreement. And Egypt has always been keen on making this balance. And by the end of the day, all these relations are for the integrity of the Sudanese territories as well as the unity of the Sudanese. And we always wish the best for the Sudanese. Sudan, as I mentioned, is an important big country that has a lot of wealth and resources, and it is one of the Nile Basin countries, and it has fertile lands full of a lot of natural resources. And maybe over these years in Africa and the Middle East, there are a lot of tensions, and Egypt has always tried to play a role in easing these tensions at different levels. Egypt has tried to contribute to settling the dispute and reducing the tension in Gaza Strip. And we are following on a daily basis the developments in Gaza. And Egypt always support the right of all nations and peoples to enjoy stability, security, and welfare. And this would be one of the files that would be discussed between President Sisi and the different leaders. And over the past months, Egypt has tried to cooperate with all countries to help Gaza. And the president had done a lot at the diplomatic level. And the Egyptian Foreign Ministry also is exerting efforts to ease the tension in Gaza Strip. All these efforts are exerted to settle tension in Sudan, in addition, of course, to the Libyan file that would be discussed also between the leaders of Egypt and Sudan, because Libya is a neighboring country to both Egypt and Sudan. Egypt is always trying to support stability and unity of these countries, and is trying to encourage them not to resort to military solutions or violence. Egypt always supports peace, the efforts of peace, and is capable of protecting peace on its lands and within its borders. Egypt has never been an aggressor, and here I quote President Sisi when he said that Egypt is a country that had always supported peace, and Egypt practices a noble policy. Talking about the Egyptian-Sudanese relations is about bilateral Sudanese-Egyptian African relation. Egypt presided over the African Union in 2019. And tried through this presidency to the African Union to help African countries and try to connect the African continent to different countries worldwide. There are business councils between Egypt and a lot of African countries that covers different sectors. And now President Sisi, accompanied by Colonel General Al Burhan to Al Ittihadiyya Palace to start this important visit. And now we'll move on to Ittihadiyya Palace.
أحييكم مشاهدينا الكرام من
Dear
مقر رئاسة
viewers,
الجمهورية
we
بمصر
are
اليونانية
at the
حيث نرحب
Presidency
بحضراتكم
Palace
مراسم
in
الاستقبال
Heliopolis,
الرسمي لضيفنا
where
الكريم
we are
الفريق
going
الأول
to
من عبد
witness
الفتاح البرهان
the official
رئيس المجلس
reception
السيادة
of the
الانتقالي السوداني
President of the
الذي يزور مصر
Sudanese
حاليا
Sovereignty
لإجراء
Council,
المباحثات الرسمية
Al-Burhan,
مع
who is
السيد
here to
الرئيس عبد
have
الفتاح السيسي
official
رئيس
talks
الجمهورية
with
والذي
President
كان
Sisi, the
باستقباله منذ
President of
قليل من
Republic,
مطار
and
القاهرة
he
الدولي.
was received by the
مصر
President
مندلعة أزمة
a few minutes
تؤخر وقتا
ago
ولا
in
تتمادى
the airport.
في الوقوف
Egypt, since
بجوار
the
الشعب
conflict in
السوداني
Sudan, has
الشقيق
always
وذلك
kept
من
supporting
أجل
the
حقن
Sudanese
دماء الشعب
people
السوداني
to stop the
والحفاظ على
bloodshed
وحدة
and to
السودان
protect the unity
واستقرارها.
of Sudan and its
فسخرت مصر
stability.
كافة
Egypt
مؤسساتها
used
المعنية
all
في هذا
its
الإطار
institutions
من
in
أجل
this context
الوقوف
for this
بجوار
purpose,
دولة
to
السودان
support
الشقيقة
Sudan,
وفقا
the brotherly
للثوابت
country,
المصرية
according to the
الخارجية
Egyptian
والتي
external
تقوم على
fixed
الحفاظ
positions
على
based
وحدة
on
الأرض
protecting the
إضافة إلى
unity of the
استقرار
countries
الشعب
as
السوداني.
well
وفي
as
قلب
the
هذا الأمر
stability
تسخير
of the
كافة
Sudanese.
الوسائل
And Egypt
المعنية
used
التي
all
من شأنها أن
means
تحافظ
that
على
can
سلامة الشعب
protect
السوداني
the
وأيضا على
Sudanese
وحدة أرض
and
السودان
protect the
وسلامته
integrity of
واستقراره.
its lands and
فمصر
its
منذ
stability.
اللحظة الأولى
Egypt,
قام
since
السيد
the
الرئيس
first
عبد
moment
الفتاح
President
السيسي بإجراء
Sisi
العديد من
held
الاتصالات
a
مع
number
كافة
of
أطراف
contacts
الأزمة
with
في
all
السودان
parties to the
إضافة إلى
conflict
قيام
and
سيادته
crisis in
بإجراء
Sudan. And the
اتصالات
President also
خارجية
had
أخرى
external
مع
contacts with
مختلف
other
القادة
leaders
والزعماء الأفارقة
worldwide and
والأوروبيين
also
أيضا في هذا الإطار والولايات
leaders in
المتحدة
Africa,
الأمريكية إضافة إلى الدول
in
العربية
addition to
والإسلامية
Arab
من أجل
Islamic
حقن دماء
countries
الشعب
to
الفلسطيني
stop the bloodshed
والحفاظ
in
على وحدة
Sudan and to
السودان
protect the
واستقراره
unity and stability
ومحاولة
of Sudan,
حلحلة هذه
as well as
الأزمة التي
exerting
لحقت
all
بدولة
efforts
السودان
to try to end
الشقيقة.
this
في هذا
crisis in
الإطار
Sudan.
تجدر
In this
الإشارة أيضا
context,
مشاهدينا الكرام
it's
إلى
worth
قيام
noting
السيد الرئيس
that
عبد الفتاح
President
السيسي بعدد من
Sisi
الزيارات
held
إلى
a
دولة
number of
السودان
visits to
الشقيقة فمنذ
Sudan
30 من يونيو
since
عام
the 30th of
2013
June
وعقب هذه
2013,
الثورة
and
واحتلال
after
السيد الرئيس عبد
this
الفتاح السيسي
revolution and
لسلطة
after
الرئاسة
President Sisi
في يونيو
assumed
2014
presidency
قام
in
السيد
June
الرئيس عبد الفتاح
2014,
السيسي بإجراء
President
عدد من
Sisi
الجولات الخارجية
held
تم
a
في
number of
مقدمتها زيارة
visits
سيادته إلى
to
دولة السودان
Sudan.
الشقيقة والتي كانت أول زيارة
And
خارجية
Sudan was the
لسيادته في
first
هذا
external
الإطار.
visit the
وأيضا
president
تجدر
made.
الإشارة أيضا إلى
And
قدوم السيد
also
الرئيس
the
عقب
president,
ولايته
after
الثانية التوجه أيضا إلى
assuming
دولة
office
السودان
for the second time, he
الشقيقة.
headed
الزيارات
also to
المتبادلة
Sudan.
فيما بين دولة
These
السودان
visits
ومصر هي
between
زيارات
Egypt
عدة.
and Sudan
وزيارات
are
السيد الرئيس في هذا
multiple.
الإطار كانت
And
تتبع زيارات
the president has visited
امتدت على
Sudan
مدار
7
السنوات
times
السابقة
over the
مما
past
يدل
years.
ويعكس
And this
مدى
signifies
اهتمام مصر بدولة
the
السودان
attention given by
كدولة
Egypt to
شقيقة
Sudan
وأيضا
as a brotherly
السودان
country
كعمق
and as
إفريقي
a
لمصر
strategic
له
depth
أهمية
for
كبرى
Egypt
إضافة
in
إلى
Africa.
الحفاظ
In
على
addition
الترابط الأخوي الذي
to
ورثه التاريخ فيما بين
protecting the
الدولتين فالعلاقات
fraternal relations
قوية
between both countries and both peoples, as Egypt and Sudan have strong historical relations.
دولة السودان الشقيقة.
Egypt also does not save any efforts in working on the stability and the unity of Sudan in this context, not only through the mutual visits that reinforced these ties and relations, but also through the fact that Egypt played an influential role on the ground for protecting Sudan and also contacting all different entities and parties to settle this dispute and end this crisis, to preserve the Sudanese and Sudan and protect also the elements in Sudan and prevent external intervention in the internal affairs of Sudan. Egypt has always called for internal solutions within Sudan, and in case the conflict widens between the brothers, Egypt and other countries saw that they need to intervene in order to contain this crisis.
إذن فلمصر دور جوهري
Egypt has
في
an
صون
essential
السلم
role
والأمن
in
على المستوى
preserving
الإقليمي وأيضا في
security
القلب
and
منه
peace
السودان.
at the regional
السودان هي
level, and
دولة
at the
شقيقة
heart comes Sudan, as
وتحاول
Sudan is a
مصر
brotherly
بكافة
country,
الطرق
and
والسبل
Egypt is trying
ويحاول
by
الرئيس
all
عبد الفتاح
means,
السيسي من
and
خلال
President Sisi is
اتصالاته
trying through his
والمؤسسات المعنية بهذا
contacts
الأمر في هذا الإطار أن تحافظ على وحدة
to
وسلامة
preserve
الشعب
the
السوداني
unity of
الشقيق، وأيضا
Sudan
حقن
and
دمائه،
to
وأيضا
prevent the
بالإضافة إلى
bloodshed
صون
of the Sudanese,
مقدرات
in
الشعب
addition
السوداني
to
والحفاظ على
supporting the
أرضه.
Sudanese
مشاهدينا
people.
الكرام، الأزمة
Dear
الراهنة
viewers,
هي
this
تعد تحديا
crisis
بالغا
in
لاستقرار
Sudan
في
is
المنطقة
considered
بأسرها،
to
لكن
jeopardize
العلاقات المتجذرة
stability in the
الضاربة
whole
في عمق
region, but
الدولتين
the
تجعل
deeply
مصر
rooted
والسودان
relations between
يمتلكان
Egypt and
نفس
Sudan
المصير
make
الواحد.
them
مصر
enjoy the
بقيادة
same fate.
الرئيس عبد
Egypt,
الفتاح
under the
السيسي، قدمت
leadership
كامل
of
الدعم
President
للشعب
Sisi,
السوداني الشقيق
provided full
في
support
تطلعاته
to
نحو
the
تحقيق الأمن
Sudanese and their
والاستقرار
aspirations
والسلام.
to achieve peace, stability and security.
تحدثنا عن الزيارات
We've talked
السياسية
about
المتتالية والتي
the
لم تحدث في
several
تاريخ
visits
البلدين،
that were
حيث
held
قام
between
السيد
both
الرئيس
leaders.
بإجراء 7
President
زيارات.
Sisi
والسياسة
paid 7
الخارجية
visits to
المصرية كما
Sudan,
نعلم
and the
جميعا
Egyptian
تعمل على
foreign
إقامة
ministry is
علاقات
working
تتميز
on
بالخصوصية
developing
والتفاهم العميق مع
special
السودان الشقيق
relations with
وإحداث
Sudan,
نقلة
as
نوعية
well
في
as
مختلف
making
المجالات.
a change in
وتعد
different
زيارات
sectors and
الرئيس عبد
fields.
الفتاح
The
السيسي إلى
visits of
السودان
President
الشقيق هي
Sisi to
دليل على عمق
Sudan
العلاقات المصرية
symbolizes
السودانية
the
وحرص
deep
الرئيس
relations
السيسي
between
أن
both
تكون
countries, and
أول
the
جولة
keenness
خارجية له
of
عقب
President
إعادة
to
اتخاذه
have
لولاية
the
ثانية
first
للسودان
official visit he
الشقيق.
ever makes after
كما
assuming
كانت أيضا
presidency to Sudan.
ضمن جولته الأولى أيضا أو أول جولة
And
خارجية له في ولايته
the first
الأولى في
external
هذا
visit
الإطار.
to
بعدها
the
توالت
president
الزيارات
was to Sudan,
المباشرة
and afterwards
للرئيس عبد
other
الفتاح السيسي
visits
للخرطوم،
were made to
وكان آخرها
Khartoum,
مارس
the last of which was
2021.
March
هكذا
2021.
تمضي مصر في
And here
علاقاتها
Egypt is
بالسودان
going
شقيقا
on developing its
برغم
relations
إداراتها
with
الواسعة
Sudan, as it realizes the importance of Sudan and the fact that it is an extension of Egypt in Africa, and it is connected also to Egyptian national security. So Egypt is connecting with all parties in Sudan to reach a permanent ceasefire to protect the lives of the Sudanese and to prevent the intervention of any external powers in a way that would ignite the internal tension. In this context comes the visit of the President of Sudanese Sovereignty Transitional Council, Colonel General Al-Burhan, to discuss the developments in Sudan, the developments in the whole region, and the bilateral relations between both countries. Egypt, with its fixed policy, supports Sudan at different levels. In addition to Egypt's role in preserving the stability and the unity of Sudan, especially through receiving a number of Sudanese guests and citizens in Egypt. And this is an extension of the Egyptian appreciative, active role in its regional surroundings. These are Egyptian intensified efforts to settle the dispute in Sudan. President Sisi has always emphasized that we need to abort this crisis through contacts with different Sudanese parties. The President, through his contacts with his counterparts in Africa and the leaders of the EU and the US, that we need to settle the dispute in Sudan and prevent it from going towards chaos. Egypt is continuing its relations with its brother Sudan. There are historical strong relations between Egypt and Sudan. Egypt and Sudan were one country at a certain time. And this has strengthened the relations between both countries that has reflected positively throughout history.
فمصر والسودان
Egypt and Sudan both have important elements to achieve integration between them from the economic perspective, as well as the Sudanese and the Egyptians are considered to be a great human capital that can provide a lot of goods and services and assimilate them also, and this can encourage trade exchange between both countries. Also, looking at the relations between Egypt and Sudan, the national anthem of Sudan. guards